You keep replaying it, don't you? The last good moment, the last warm text, the last night they held you like nothing was wrong. And then the shift you couldn't explain, the cooling, the distance, the strange invisible wall that seemed to rise between you while you were still standing right there, still loving them, still trying, still offering softness with both hands, like maybe tenderness could stop someone from disappearing. But it couldn't. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not just that they left, but that they left something good, something safe, something real, something that didn't deserve to be abandoned. So your mind does what wounded minds do. It starts searching for a mistake, something you missed, something you said, something you could have fixed if only you had seen it sooner. Because the truth feels too cruel to touch. That sometimes people walk away not because the love was wrong, but because it was right in a way their nervous system did not know how to survive. That is the truth most people never tell you about dismissive avoidance. They do not only run from pain, they run from intimacy that feels too powerful to control. And good relationships are dangerous precisely because they work. That's what breaks your heart. It wasn't the toxicity that scared them. It was the closeness, the consistency, the fact that you kept showing up, the fact that your love asked them to be present in a place where they had spent their entire life learning how to disappear. Because when someone has built an identity around self-containment, emotional distance, and not needing anyone, love does not always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like exposure. Sometimes it feels like being watched while drowning. And sometimes the very thing they begged for in secret becomes the very thing they destroy when it arrives. This is the brutal truth. A dismissive avoidant can leave a good relationship and still miss you, still care, still think about you at night, still feel the ache of your absence in quiet moments they never talk about. But caring is not the same as being able to stay. Love is not the same as capacity. Missing you is not the same as choosing you. That's why this hurts in such a maddening way. Because part of you could feel that they loved you in their own fractured, limited, terrified way. And yet they still pulled away, still shut down, still made you feel like your need for closeness was too much, your emotions too loud, your heart too alive. So let's say the thing that almost nobody says clearly enough. They did not leave because the relationship was too bad. They often leave because it was becoming too real. And real intimacy does something unbearable inside the dismissive system. It activates old survival code. Not because they're evil, not because they're heartless, but because somewhere deep in their body, closeness has been linked with danger, engulfment, pressure, disappointment, obligation, or loss of self. When a dismissive avoidant starts getting truly attached, the body can register that attachment almost like a threat. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, begins scanning for danger, even when the danger is emotional closeness, not actual harm. Cortisol rises. The nervous system shifts toward protection. The mind starts rewriting the story. Small flaws suddenly feel huge. Normal relationship needs start to feel intrusive. Warmth begins to feel suffocating. Vulnerability begins to feel like losing oxygen. And because the body is overwhelmed, the mind creates distance to justify what the nervous system is already trying to do. This is why they can go from connected to cold so fast it gives you emotional whiplash. One moment, they're affectionate. The next, they need space. The next, they're confused. The next, they're telling themselves, maybe this just isn't right. But the confusion is often a defense. The detachment is often a survival response. The sudden certainty that the relationship is wrong can be the mind's attempt to explain a flood of internal dysregulation it cannot consciously name. They don't sit there thinking, I am being triggered by healthy intimacy because it challenges my lifelong dependence on emotional distance. No, they just feel overwhelmed, crowded, irritated, numb, restless, trapped. And then they leave. Not because they stopped caring, because caring started costing them too much internally. That is what makes the experience so devastating for the person who loved them. You're trying to respond to the words, but the real battle is happening underneath the words, inside a nervous system that confuses connection with danger. And if you've ever loved someone like this, you know the cruelty of it. You can feel them reaching for you and retreating from you at the same time. You can feel their longing and their resistance living in the same body. You can feel that the more genuine the love becomes, the more they seem to vanish. Because dismissive avoidance is not just about not wanting connection. It is often about wanting it so deeply that needing it feels humiliating. That is the secret wound. Many dismissive avoidants learned early that vulnerability was unsafe, dependency was shameful, and emotions were better handled alone. Maybe no one came when they needed comfort. Maybe closeness came with criticism. Maybe tenderness was inconsistent. Maybe being too emotional made them feel weak, exposed, or rejected. So they adapted. They became self-sufficient. They learned to minimize needs before those needs could become pain. And that adaptation can look strong from the outside. Calm, independent, unbothered, rational, hard to reach. But under that polished distance is often a nervous system that never learned how to feel close without feeling consumed. So when a good relationship begins offering stability, reassurance, tenderness, and emotional safety, it doesn't just activate pleasure. Yes, dopamine is there in the beginning, especially in the early spark, the chase, the novelty, the sense of possibility without full vulnerability. But as the relationship deepens, something else emerges. Emotional accountability, dependence, mutual need. The reality of being seen over time. That is where dismissive patterns begin to panic. Because casual connection is one thing, being known is another. Being wanted from a distance can feel flattering. Being needed up close can feel unbearable. And if the relationship is truly good, if you are kind, emotionally available, patient, and consistent, then there are fewer external problems for them to focus on, fewer distractions, fewer excuses, which means they are left face to face with the one thing they've spent years avoiding, their own internal vulnerability. A toxic relationship can actually feel easier for them to stay in longer because chaos creates distance. Dysfunction gives them room to stay emotionally fragmented, but a healthy relationship gently removes the hiding places. And that is why good relationships can become the breaking point. Because goodness asks for presence. Goodness asks them to soften, to stay, to answer the text with honesty, to name what they feel before it hardens into silence, to let love matter enough that it could hurt if lost. That last part is everything. To love deeply is to risk grief. To attach is to risk needing. To stay is to risk not being in control. And control is often the quiet addiction of the dismissive avoidant. Not obvious control, not domination, emotional control. The ability to pull back first, need less first, detach first, leave first. Because the one who leaves first never has to fully feel what it means to be left. So when the relationship starts becoming precious, when you start becoming home, when your voice begins living in the soft places of their mind, something destabilizing happens. They may not say it out loud, but part of them starts sensing, I could lose this. I could need this. I could be hurt by this. And for someone whose safety strategy is built on not needing, that realization can be intolerable. So they do what they've always done. They reduce contact. They intellectualize. They focus on your flaws. They become busy. They say they need space to think. They start feeling emotionally flat. They convince themselves something is missing. They call the relationship too much, when what they really mean is, I cannot regulate what this closeness is stirring inside me. That is why silence becomes such a central force in these dynamics. Silence is not always indifference. Sometimes, silence is the only way they know how to regain control over an emotional flood they don't understand. Silence is their anesthesia, their shield, their illusion of safety. When they go quiet, it can look like power. It can make you spiral, question yourself, chase, explain, overextend. And in that moment, the whole dynamic bends around their withdrawal. Your nervous system goes into pursuit. Theirs goes into distance. And suddenly, the relationship becomes organized around your panic and their disappearance. This is where so many people lose themselves. Because when someone pulls away from a good relationship, especially without a clean explanation, it creates a wound that begs for movement. You want to fix it, clarify it, reach them, remind them, prove the love was real, prove you were safe, prove they made a mistake. But here is the part that changes everything. Chasing an avoidant in their shutdown does not make them feel safer. It makes them feel more engulfed. Even if your message is loving, even if your intentions are pure, even if you are only asking for the bare minimum of closure. When they are in that overwhelmed state, pursuit can confirm the exact fear their nervous system is trying to escape. That closeness means pressure, emotional demand, and loss of freedom. And that is why the dynamic turns so painfully upside down. The more you reach, the more they retreat. The more you explain, the less they feel. The more available you become, the less they value what is in front of them. Not because you are too much, because their system can only process your value once the pressure of your presence is gone. That is the tragedy. And yes, eventually, many of them do start thinking about you differently. Not always immediately. Sometimes not until the emotional noise settles. Not until the cortisol drops. Not until the relief they felt after leaving begins to wear off. Because at first, distance can feel euphoric to a dismissive avoidant. Like finally exhaling. Like getting their skin back. Like escaping something heavy they never knew how to carry. But relief is not the same as peace. And once the nervous system calms, something else creeps in. The emptiness. The absence of your warmth. The strange quiet where your care used to live. The memory of how safe it actually was. The realization that nobody else understood them quite like that. The recognition that what felt suffocating may have actually been intimacy. This is often when the mind circles back. They replay your kindness, your steadiness, the little ways you loved them, the way you reached for them without trying to own them, the way you saw through their armor, even when they were hiding. And suddenly, the person they needed distance from becomes the person they cannot fully escape internally. They miss you, sometimes deeply, sometimes obsessively, sometimes in ways they would die before admitting. But this is where people misunderstand the story. Missing you does not mean they have transformed. Thinking about you does not mean they are ready. Regret does not automatically create capacity. A dismissive avoidant can miss the relationship and still repeat the pattern if they return without doing the work. That is the warning. Because if you confuse their longing with healing, you will walk straight back into the same wound, wearing new hope. And hope can be a dangerous drug when it is mixed with unresolved attachment trauma. So if they come back, or if part of you is still secretly waiting for them to come back, listen carefully. Do not be seduced by emotion without evidence. Do not be hypnotized by their sudden softness if their patterns remain intact. Do not mistake temporary vulnerability for genuine change. Real change is not them saying, "I've been thinking about you." Real change is them staying in the discomfort of closeness without fleeing. Real change is them naming their shutdown instead of punishing you with it. Real change is them learning to regulate instead of disappearing. Real change is accountability, consistency, emotional risk, honesty that does not arrive only after loss. Anything less is just the old pattern in a more romantic voice. And this is the moment where your power either returns to you or leaves with them again. Because the deepest transformation in this story is not actually about whether the dismissive avoidant comes back. It is about whether you stop abandoning yourself in the process of trying to be unforgettable to someone who was terrified of remembering what love feels like. Read that again in your soul. Your life cannot become a waiting room for someone else's emotional capacity. Your worth cannot be measured by whether an avoidant finally chooses to stay. Your tenderness is not more meaningful because it was given to someone emotionally unavailable. Your pain is not proof of depth. And being difficult to replace does not mean you are truly received. There comes a point where the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding their own heart. That is where the pattern breaks. Not when they apologize, not when they circle back, not when they finally realize you were good. When you realize you are no longer available for love that must lose you to recognize your value. That is the shift. Because the truth is, dismissive avoidants often do feel the loss later. They do revisit what they had. They do wonder. They do compare. They do feel the ghost of your absence in future connections that lack the safety you offered. But your healing cannot be built around becoming a lesson in someone else's evolution. You are not here to be the heartbreak that teaches another person how to love. You are here to become someone who no longer negotiates with emotional scarcity. Someone who can look at silence and not interpret it as mystery, but as information. Someone who can feel chemistry without confusing it for safety. Someone who can witness withdrawal and not call it depth. Someone who can love without crawling. Someone who can miss people without chasing them into their own emptiness. That kind of self-worth is quiet, but it is ferocious. It does not beg. It does not perform. It does not shrink itself into emotional, bite-sized pieces just to be easier to digest. It knows that the right love will not require you to betray your own nervous system just to hold someone else's together. And maybe that is the final truth no one told you. The real power dynamic does not flip when they start missing you. It flips when you stop needing that to matter. It flips when their silence no longer defines your value. When their confusion no longer becomes your responsibility. When their inability to stay close no longer makes you question whether you were lovable enough, gentle enough, patient enough, worthy enough. You were. You were probably loving someone who had only learned how to receive love in fragments. And that is sad. But it is not your sentence. So if you are sitting in the aftermath of a good relationship that a dismissive avoidant walked away from, let this land somewhere deeper than your thoughts. They may have cared more than they could handle. They may have left because the closeness overwhelmed them. They may one day understand what they lost, but none of that changes what you must do now. Return to yourself. Return to your body, your standards, your clarity, your life, your future that does not revolve around being chosen by someone afraid of choosing. Let them wrestle with the silence they created. Let them face the emptiness of what they abandoned. Let them learn or not learn in their own time. Your task is different now. Your task is to become unavailable for half love dressed up as complexity. Unavailable for intimacy that evaporates when it gets real. Unavailable for the kind of connection that asks you to earn what should be given freely. Because the version of you that comes out of this is not smaller, not broken, not bitter, not begging for answers. Wiser, cleaner, more sovereign. You stop romanticizing emotional unavailability. You stop worshipping potential. You stop calling anxiety intuition. You stop chasing people who only feel safe loving you from a distance. And in that moment, something beautiful and almost terrifying happens. You become the one who leaves the old pattern behind, not the person, the pattern, the hunger, the proving, the obsession, the aching need to be the exception. You let all of it die. And what rises in its place is something stronger than being wanted. Self-respect. A love for yourself that does not tremble when someone withdraws. A steadiness that does not collapse in silence. A power that does not need revenge, closure, or even explanation. Just truth. And the truth is this: anyone can feel something. Not everyone can sustain it. Anyone can be drawn to your light. Not everyone can stay when it starts illuminating their wounds. Anyone can call you special. Not everyone is built, yet, to love someone special well. So let them go if they must go. Let the fantasy go too. And become the kind of person who no longer mistakes someone's inability to stay for evidence that you were hard to love. You were never hard to love. You were simply too real for someone who survived by staying numb. And now you know. Now you stop chasing closed doors. Now you stop bleeding meaning into silence. Now you stop asking why someone who felt so much could still walk away. Because sometimes the answer is brutally simple. They left a good relationship because goodness required a depth they had not yet learned to survive. And you? You are done shrinking your heart to fit inside someone else's fear.